Joining us now, our newsmaker of the morning. We're pleased to welcome House Speaker Mike Johnson. Once again, Mr. Speaker, it's good to have you on.
Thanks so much, Joe. Great to be with you again.
We're looking at some of your notes. Serious mismatch is how you characterize the debate between former President Trump and President Biden. And you say if you've watched President Biden, he hasn't done well in some public appearances and speeches in recent months. Everybody who thinks he's going to do well and worries about him being underestimated talk about the State of the Union. You don't think that that's likely to be the take after we watch?
You know what? I expect him to be high energy. I really do, because I sat right behind him at the State of the Union, and clearly that was not his regular, daily, normal form now. I don't know if he took energy drinks or what, but he was much more on game. The difference is, and I think the difference maker in this debate will be that, of course, he'll have no teleprompter this time. So standing there for 90 minutes and speaking extemporaneously, I think is not going to be a good look for him. And I think the contrast between Donald Trump and President Joe Biden is going to be very stark.
The format, people have pointed out, is not necessarily doesn't play into former President Trump's strengths. No audience. They turn the mic off between, answers, things like that. When he agreed to the debate, there's some reports around now, Mr. Speaker, that he thought that the Biden camp was kind of setting him up to say no, and then everyone would have said no. In other words, it's going to be these two CNN anchors, maybe not, that might not be ideal, according to some people, not me, far be it from me to judge, the no audience, et cetera, but Trump said yes to kind of throw him for a loop, and that he'll go anywhere, any place. Do you think that that's an accurate account of what happened?
I don't think it is. I spent time with President Trump last week, and I can tell you what, he's excited about this debate. He's ready to get on that stage. And I think the reason he accepted the term so quickly is because he had just said a couple of days before, anytime, anywhere, Joe, So to his credit, look, you can tie him up, you can put one arm behind his back. I mean, it's not going to make a difference. President Trump, I think, is going to lay out a very clear vision for the country, a very positive one. And I think that's going to be a stark contrast with the Biden record. The interesting thing about both of these men is that they both have been president. So everybody can put the rhetoric aside, the talking points aside. They can evaluate how their life is under Joe Biden and how it was under Donald Trump. And I think everybody in every demographic in every state in the country, if they look at it objectively, I think they're going to say they were doing much, much better under President Trump. That's why I think he's going to win this election, and we're going to grow the House majority and win the Senate as well.
Former President Trump the other night at one of his rallies actually posed the question who he should be to the people that he was talking to at that point. Obviously, want the sharp-edged Donald Trump. The Wall Street Journal, and as I said earlier, I'm not sure the former President Trump would take any advice from the Wall Street Journal. They haven't been, necessarily his biggest backers in this go-around. But they do point out if he engages in grievance politics about 2020. In other words, if Jake Tapper starts out with, do you accept the results of 2020? You've talked to the former President Trump. Can he say, I'm not going to dwell on that, and I want to talk about how my policies are going to help Americans versus President Biden's? Can he avoid that? Are you sure? What do you think?
Look, I hope he does. We don't need to relitigate the past. We need to talk about what he's going to do for the future. We have to fix every single metric of public policy. And I can tell you, he keeps talking about how his success will be his revenge. And we love that, because I think that's exactly what the American people need. They need his success. Look, I've been traveling nonstop, Joe. I've been all over the country, over 130 cities, campaign events over the last 6 months in over 30 states now. I mean, we've been everywhere. Blue states, swing districts, red states, all across the country. Doesn't matter where we are. The same sentiment is expressed. People are fed up. They're fed up with the cost of living. They cannot stay ahead. They can't keep afloat because no matter how hard they work, the inflation rate and everything else is just crushing hardworking families. Then you got the rising crime rates. You got the weakness on the world stage. All these things that make us unsettled. And, of course, the open border. And Everybody feels that acutely, and they're ready for a change. And I think because of all those factors and many more, you're going to see a demographic shift in this election cycle. And I think President Trump is going to win this election. And like I said, I think Republicans will have control of both chambers of Congress. And we're looking forward to that because we have answers to all these great challenges facing the country.